Hey everybody, Azure Strife here from Next Level Z, back at Top Deck Cards and Games with another Dragon Ball Z deck profile. This time I've brought a new deck that I've just started working on and that the more and more I play it, the more I realize I really like it. I'm generally not a control player, but I wanted to try my hand at it. I have Black Devious Raditz. Reason I chose Raditz, his named cards, and I feel with the way the meta has become with Cell's implementation, your deck needs to be able to perform its strategies on level 1, which Raditz can do. Raditz's level 1 is incredibly powerful. It's a physical attack, so it's an attack, generate an action, does 1 life card, so your mastery will allow it to do 2 life cards and 1 power stage, a little bit of chip damage. What you do after that is you reveal the top 2 cards of your banner zone, of your life deck. Choose one of them to put into your hand, the other one goes into the banner zone. So you can lose an important card, but just being able to generate more card advantage in a style with a mastery that allows you to manipulate your opponent's hand is so powerful. And then finally, raise your anger 1. I have left level 1 all of 1 time with this deck. The level 2 is incredibly powerful. I just don't run enough anger to really consistently get there, and generally I want to sit on level 1. As level 2, whenever one of your setups or drills enters play, your opponent mills the top card of their life deck. If it's during combat, you get that effect on top of raising your anger 1, which you'll see later how Raditz actually has the ability to put setups and drills into play during combat, which is generally not something most people can do. His later levels, while very powerful, I will very rarely get to, and if I do get to them, somebody either made a mistake or the game is about to be over. Because it's level 3, when entering combat, your opponent randomly discards a card from their hand. So if you're on the aggression and your opponent's been keeping that 1 card in their hand, they have to discard it. Or if they are entering on you, that means they pretty much like their hand, and you're going to get to randomly kill one of them. And then his level 4 is very complicated. So when one of your setups or drills enters play, choose a card in your discard pile and rejuvenate it. The first time you use a critical damage effect each combat, you may search your life deck or discard pile for a setup or drill and place it into play. Very powerful effect. I should never get there, and you should never get there with this deck. As this deck generally wants to sit on level 1 and just generate a ton of hand advantage through Black's ability to perform actions, and with a drill that we are going to get into here very soon. So we're going to start with our planning phase cards. Running 1 copy of Villainous Visage. It's a staple for every villain. I don't care what kind of deck you're running. In my opinion, this card should be in every villain deck. It is just so powerful, not only for its effect, but the mindset it puts your opponent in. It just creates the ever-looming threat on the board. It makes your opponent change how they're going to play, which you can't quantify its power in numbers with that. So running that. 2 copies, Visit in the Past. I can't say this enough how powerful this card is. 2 of in every deck. Just being able to grab any card from your discard pile as you want. Incredibly powerful. 2 copies of Raditz 30 Tactics. It's one of Raditz's named cards. Limit 2 per deck. It is a setup, banish after use. Power. Name a setup or drill. Search your opponent's life deck and hand for all copies of that card and banish them. Incredibly powerful effect. Not only do you just get to banish setups and drills from their deck, you get to search their hand, so you get to see what they have in their hand, even if they don't have that setup in their hand. So it does multiple effects while still being able to kill primary targets. If you're ever unsure of what to name, Visiting the Past. Your opponent will most certainly be running 2 of them, and you can generally target them. So, moving on. 3 copies of Black Searching Technique. You'll start to see the theme of this deck is destroying key threats before they ever become a threat. The setup, banish after use, allows you to search your opponent's deck for 2 cards, 2 non-Dragon Ball cards, and banish them. It can be any 2 cards, they just can't be Dragon Balls. Very powerful. And also, it allows you to look through their deck and see what they're running. see what you have to be worried about, and also set up an event that we're going to see in a little bit. 3 copies of Black Smoothest Drill, because this is the best card in the game. This, in a game that wants you to work for hand advantage, this card just gives it to you. It's a drill. Your maximum hand size is +1 during the discard step. So, as we know, during your discard step, you have to discard down to 1. Black Smoothest Drill says I get to keep 2. Black Smoothest Drill plus Raditz level 1 power means I have 2 cards over my opponent. On top of my mastery that says I can discard a black card to make my opponent discard a card from their hand. It's just so powerful. It's just generating so much advantage off of very little effort. Running 3 copies of Black Power Up. So its power raise a personality to its highest power stage, and you may end combat. This deck doesn't want to be in combat for very long. It wants to do what it needs to do in combat and bail out, which is a really odd play style for me, as I generally like to be in combat. And I'm learning with this deck goes very aggressive in the early game and then locks down. Once it's hit its key cards that it needs to hit out of the opponent's deck and hits a very crucial attack that we will see later, it just locks down, goes full defensive, and tries to stay out of combat as much as possible. And finally, for our planning phases, we're running 3 copies of Black Declaration. Black Devious, there is no reason to not run at least 2 copies of this card. It is never a dead card. So, it's a setup. If this card is discarded from your hand during combat, place it into play. Already incredibly powerful. If we're on Raditz level 2, that's giving us an anger and milling our opponent a card. Endurance 2, power, choose an ally, drill, setup, or Dragon Ball in play and shuffle it into the owner's life deck. Can target your own stuff. If you're about to level up, shuffle in your Smoothness Drill so that it doesn't go away when you level up. Your opponent's got a Dragon Ball that you need to get off the field. They have an ally that you need to get off the field. Just being able to target your opponent's board and deal with it on command is an incredibly powerful effect. So, then we're going to get into the events of the deck. You're going to see some recurring cards that you will have seen in some of my other videos. Timeless Warrior's Tool. I have said a lot about this card. One of the best cards in the game. Stop all attacks from your opponent. No reason to not run it. Limit 1 per deck. 2 copies of Black Reflection. I love this card. I actually want to bump this card up to a 3 of. Banish after use. Power. Search your opponent's banish zone for an attack card and play it. So, if your opponent is blue, they have Blue Terror, which allows them to search their deck for any non-Dragon Ball card. Blue will not want to play Blue Terror against black because of Black Reflection, unless they know they're going to get more value out of it than you. Also, Master Roshi. They're going to play their Roshi's Backstrikes. You're going to be able to play their Roshi's Backstrikes. That's really good. That's what makes Master Roshi really good, is his ability to search for any card in his deck. Just Black Reflection is so good. Also, it sends the attack card back to where it normally go. So if it's a banish after use card, it banishes it after use. So sometimes you can use cards and never have to worry about the effect. Also, one little thing that I realized with this card is heroes have a card called Pesky Barrage, which has an effect of if your level 4's power level is less than 500,000, it can be used a second time during combat, which is an energy attack for 5 life cards. Raditz's level 4's power level is 22,000. You can Black Reflection, Pesky Barrage, and use it twice. Raditz gets the effect of being a villain while using hero-only cards. It's awesome. Next, running 2 copies of Black Scout Maneuver. Again, back to the theme of this deck of targeted threat removal. Namekian, you can target their Namekian hybrid defenses before they ever become a problem. Anything that you're really worried about. Blocks, Sinister Choke, which you'll see later because this deck is running it as well. Just early game can really cripple a deck. 2 copies, Villainous Energy Sphere. We are running a control deck, so we want to shut down. Timeless Warrior's Tool isn't as big of a threat for this deck, but we want to shut down, stare down, confrontation, any other events that could be a problem. Defiant Challenge is not so much, when I was speaking of the Roshi matchup, because Raditz does have an attack named card that is very good. Generally, this is for stare down and confrontation, as we don't want them messing with our hand, because we like our hand, we don't like theirs. Speaking of which, actually, I want to bump this up to a 3 of. I'm just trying to figure out where to make room for it. Speaking of which, stare down, 3 of. Yes, I want my opponent to discard their worst threat in their hand. And then I'm going to Mastery, and I'm going to discard another card from their hand. And I'm going to use Raditz's power, and I'm going to get another card advantage on them. Just creating so much hand advantage that your opponent just can't deal with it. Running 3 copies of Black Foreshadowing. This card, very, very powerful event. Endurance 3. It's really beefy. Power, mill your opponent X cards, where X equals the number of different card types in their banner zone. So that's physical combat, energy combat, event, setup, drill, ally, Dragon Ball. For those who aren't counting at home, that's 7 different card types. You can mill them for 7 cards. Up to. And you also gain that number of stages. Very, very good if you're stage locked. And with the amount of targeted destruction you have from the deck, you can generally cap this card out very, very quickly. You obviously can't willingly get a Dragon Ball into the deck, but it might happen. Into my block suites, for my energy blocks, I'm running 3 Black Evasion. Been testing with this card. It originally was Black Resistance, but I already knew how that card worked. So I wanted to try out Black Evasion. I'm liking it. It combos really well with Raditz's level 1. So it stops an energy attack. You can choose a card in your opponent's discard pile. If you do, your opponent rejuvenates it, and then both players get to put a card from their discard pile on top of their deck. The big thing is you get to choose which card goes back to the top of their deck, and yours. So it allows you to set up Raditz's level 1 power. Put a card that you want on top, and then use his power to be able to draw into it. Really, really awesome effect. And then staple of black, 3 black swipes, 2 endurance, stop an energy attack, banish 3 cards from your opponent's discard pile. What more can you ask for from an energy block in a deck that is doing this? I find myself playing that block over every other energy block in almost every black deck I run. And then my physical block suite is very, very interesting. I was saying this before I started recording. I'm running 5 physical blocks and 3 different kinds. So first off, I'm running 1 copy of Black Delay. This card is there for sale. It has been errated, so it stops physical attack. If it's a physical combat card that does not banish after use, it goes back to their hand and randomly discard a card from their hand. If it's banished after use, it just is banished after use, and it's a physical block with 1 endurance. It is there for sale because against a personality power, you stop it and they randomly discard a card from their hand. Because it wasn't a physical combat card, it doesn't go back to their hand. Also really good against blue stretch kick, any of the non-physical combat physical attacks. There are a few. Running 2 copies of Black Easy Block, new block from set 5, 2 endurance, stop physical attack, lower your opponent's anger 1, and all of your attacks are considered styled as combat. Really, really nice with the amount of non-styled hate there is in the game right now. And finally, 2 copies of Black Finger Block. Great physical attack, endurance 1, stop a physical, your MP gains 3 stages. Your main personality raises 3 stages, really good if you're getting stage locked. Also allows you to kind of take that first physical attack, lose some stages, then block the next one, gain 3 stages back. Love that card. Next, running into our energy attacks. 2 copies of Black Energy Bubble. I'm loving this card the more I test with it. It only costs 1 stage, gives you an anger. If your opponent stops it, they have to randomly discard a card from their hand, so they're rarely going to stop it. But if they've already played Time as a Warrior's Tool, you can run into the Time as a Warrior's Tool to make them randomly discard, and then you get to use your Mastery to make them discard again. It does do 3 life cards, so because of our Mastery, it's going to do 4 life cards, 1 power stage, which your opponent might not want to take that at certain parts of the game. So it really puts your opponent in a predicament. Running 2 copies Black Energy Web, energy attack, solid energy attack, 2 stages, 6 life cards, and if it hits, your opponent can't play energy attacks for the remainder. They can't perform energy attacks for the remainder of combat. Very, very strong effect against a lot of decks. And finally, one of the win conditions of the deck, actually, Black Capture. Energy attack costing 3 stages, does 5 life cards of damage. If it hits, it attaches to your opponent's main personality, and at the beginning of every turn, they banish the top card of their life deck. Wow. That card is incredibly powerful, and this was the card I was saying, if this card attaches, the deck locks down. The deck does not allow your opponent to get it off. The only way to get it off, other than targeted attach removal, is to deal critical damage. This deck has a lot of endurance, this deck has a lot of blocks, can get rid of those auto crit cards, and then just bails out of combat when it doesn't feel safe to keep Black Capture on. Like I said, it's one of the win conditions of the deck. Also, another nice thing, this card can target Dragon Balls. If your opponent banishes the top card of their life deck and it's a Dragon Ball, it's banished. So that's how you get it in there for the Black Foreshadowing. And finally, my physical attacks. Running 2 copies of Playful Punch. This is great. When I learned that Raditz can use this card, I loved it. This is generally more used as a block than an attack, but it is a physical attack that you gain 5 stages, lower your opponent's anger 1 level, and it does 3 life cards. So it does 4 life cards in a stage with the mastery, but it also can be used for an Omni block for a non-styled attack, which there are a lot of. So that's just a great card that Raditz gains access to. 2 Wall Breakers. This card is... I don't need to tell some of the community exactly what I feel about this card. This card is frustrating, but it's necessary against a lot of anger decks. It's physical attack, does AT +1, so it's not going to do a lot of damage. It doesn't have to hit, though. It attaches to your opponent's main personality, and while it's attached, they can't gain anger. That's really powerful. That's really all I can say about that. And into Raditz's another named card, Raditz Offensive Guard. This card is fantastic. So, you may banish this card from your hand to stop a physical or energy attack. Alright, he gets an Omni block. Okay. Physical attack, damage AT +4 stages. Attached to your main personality. While attached once per combat, as an action, you may place into play a setup or drill from your hand. Banish this card when you would change levels. Alright. This card does so much of what you want it to do. Damage. It allows you to have far less dead draws and an Omni block. And one thing that I learned, with all the cards that say your opponent can't play non-styled cards, this gets around it with its block because you're not playing it. You're banishing it to stop it. It's really good. Next, 3 copies of Sinister Choke. This card is so strong. Physical attack, can't have its damage prevented, 5 life cards, and it can't be stopped, and damage is banished if your opponent controls a total of 7 or more drills, setups, Dragon Balls, and personalities. Counts their main personality. So, against a lot of control decks, they're going to have 7. And you're going to be able to hit Sinister Choke for 6 life cards and 1 power stage from your mastery. Can't be stopped, can't be prevented, and all that damage is banished. What do we love in this deck? Cards in the Banish Zone. And finally, 3 copies of Black Defensive Burst. Probably one of the best physical attacks in the game. 4 life cards, 5 life cards, 1 stage with the mastery. Hit your opponent, can't perform physical attacks for the remainder of combat. That is horrid against a lot of decks. A lot of decks will purposefully hold physical blocks because they fear this card, which is what we want. We want them holding blocks like physical attacks, physical blocks, because that's what we care about. So guys, that's been my Black Devious Raditz. I'm really loving this deck. If you guys like what you guys saw, feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, follow us on Facebook. We have DBZ tournaments here every Saturday. And again, thank you guys for watching.